A 19-year-old girl was found murdered naked, indicating she had been sexually assaulted before her death. Despite discovering numerous clues at the scene, the police struggled to identify the killer's identity. It wasn't until they received an anonymous tip-off that they realized the killer had been right under their noses all along, even being considered one of the most trusted individuals. His suspicion was directly ruled out. How on earth did this happen? And how did the killer manage to deceive everyone, using what tactics? The victim's name was Sonia, a mere 19 years old at the time of the incident. Born on April 13, 1984, she grew up in a village in Alaska with a population of fewer than 600 people. However, from a young age, she yearned for the world beyond, dreaming of attending college in Hawaii after finishing high school. Sonia's family wasn't well off, so she had to find a way to cover all her college expenses on her own. At the age of 16, she ventured to Nome, a more developed town in Alaska, working and studying tirelessly for 3 years. Through her hard work and frugality, Sonia finally saved enough money to pursue her college dreams. But just weeks before she was set to start school, a ruthless killer raped and murdered her, shattering the possibility of this young girl's college dream ever coming true. August 10, 2003, a Sunday. Sonia and her roommate were invited to a party. With work looming the next day, around midnight Sonia decided to head back to her dormitory to rest. Not wanting to dampen her friend's spirits, she left alone instead of asking her roommate to join her. Nome had a population of fewer than 4,000 people, mostly indigenous Inuit people, with a simple social structure where most knew each other. Given the town's close-knit nature and low crime rate, when Sonia said she was leaving to rest, her friends didn't worry about her safety. Little did they know that this would be her final farewell. Early the next morning, Sonia's roommate returned to their dorm but found no sign of Sonia. When work time came, Sonia was still missing, and her phone was unreachable. Concerned, the roommate alerted the authorities. After learning the sequence of events, the police first checked Sonia's residence. Her passport, personal documents, and bank cards were all still there, leading the police to rule out the possibility of her leaving Nome. Subsequently, the police initiated a formal search. Given Nome's small size and the fact that the police were locals, they were intimately familiar with the area. This aided in swift progress during the search. Around 9 p.m. on August 13th, the police found Sonia in a secluded thicket. Unfortunately, she had already become a cold, lifeless corpse by the time she was discovered. Sonia's lifeless body lay naked in a pit, her body and face covered in bruises. Forensic examination revealed she had suffered sexual assault during her life. An evident gunshot wound to her head was the cause of her demise. This tranquil small town was now the site of a homicide, and the local police couldn't afford to be complacent. With a total of 8 officers in Nome's police force, all their efforts were directed towards solving this case and apprehending the killer as soon as possible. After examining the crime scene, the authorities found clear tire tracks nearby and a piece of blue car paint on a snap tree branch, likely from an accidental scrape by a passing vehicle. Given the remote location, with hardly any reason for people to drive there, the police preliminarily deduced that the perpetrator had used a blue car. Considering the sexual nature of the crime, the police narrowed down their suspect pool to males who owned blue cars and might have had an interest in Sonia. By unraveling Sonia's relationships, the police quickly homed in on a man named Donnie. According to informants, Donnie had pursued Sonia for a considerable period of time, even after her polite rejections. He remained infatuated with her, often smiling foolishly at her photos. Coincidentally, Donnie owned a blue pickup truck, making him a prime suspect. Consequently, the police immediately brought him in for questioning. However, Donnie proved uncooperative during the police interrogation, claiming he hadn't been in town at the time. But when pressed about his whereabouts, his eyes darted away, and he avoided giving a direct answer, suggesting he was concealing something. This heightened the police's suspicions. A day after the questioning, the police obtained a search warrant to inspect Donnie's residence. They discovered numerous suspicious items on the spot. In the backyard, They found the blue pickup truck and a pair of white sneakers with blood stains, a piece of blue waterproof fabric also marked with blood stains, and 3 hunting rifles, which also had blood stains on the stocks. These compelling pieces of evidence made the police almost certain that Donnie was Sonia's killer. Subsequently, they brought him back to the station for further questioning and subjected the collected items to forensic analysis. With Donnie as the prime suspect, the police conducted a harsh interrogation, convinced of his guilt. Realizing the gravity of the situation, Donnie admitted that the blood found in his house wasn't human blood, but rather from a wild boar. He explained that during the time of the incident, he was out hunting in the outskirts and not in town. He hadn't mentioned hunting during the initial interrogation due to his lack of hunting license, hence his choice to conceal it. Though Donnie's explanation was plausible, the police weren't entirely convinced and decided to await the results of the evidence testing before making a final judgment. Soon enough, the test results were in, confirming Donnie's claim that the blood in his house was solely from wild boars. Additionally, the caliber of the bullets from Donnie's 3 hunting rifles didn't match the gunshot wound on Sonia's body. This meant that Donnie wasn't the perpetrator, prompting the police to release him. As for his unauthorized hunting activities, the police temporarily set that aside, asking him to await further investigation. While this round of investigation didn't yield results, the police still believed that the key to cracking the case lay with the blue car. Consequently, they launched a comprehensive survey of all vehicles in the small town. Given the town's modest population, the police quickly identified a suspicious vehicle. By checking license plate information, they learned that the owner of the vehicle was named Benjamin, a 23-year-old who wasn't a local resident. He was also the only non-resident in town. Benjamin had come to Nome because his girlfriend lived there. Benjamin's car was indeed a blue sedan. Given his non-local status and the timing of the incident, it was easy for the police to instinctively suspect him. After conducting a detailed investigation into Benjamin, the police discovered through his travel records that he had only arrived in Nome on the afternoon of August 12th. The forensic analysis suggested that Sonia had been killed in the early hours of August 11th. Clearly, Benjamin couldn't have been the killer as he didn't have the opportunity. Facing yet another setback in the investigation, the police remained undeterred, continuing to pursue leads related to the blue car. Despite searching through all the town's residents, they failed to find any more blue cars. With a population of less than 4,000 people in the town, the number of cars was quite limited, making it highly unlikely for them to miss any during their search. Could they have been mistaken? Was the perpetrator not driving a blue car after all? Just as the police were losing their investigative direction, a phone call turned the case around. One day in September 2003, roughly a month after the incident, the police received an anonymous tip. The caller, a woman, claimed to have seen Sonia on the night of the incident. She explained that as she was taking out the trash, she coincidentally saw Sonia heading home. They exchanged greetings before the woman noticed a police car parked in front of Sonia. Sonia had a brief conversation with the officer before getting into the police car and leaving. The caller didn't catch a glimpse of the officer's face. The woman admitted she hadn't come forward earlier due to fear of trouble. But witnessing the police's inability to catch the killer, she couldn't bear to see Sonia's death remain unresolved and decided to reveal the truth. Upon hearing this, the officer who took the call was initially taken aback, but then it dawned on them. The police cars at the time had a blue and white color scheme. The blue car paint found at the crime scene might have been left by a police car. The officer who took Sonia away might have been the real culprit. This revelation explained why the police couldn't find the blue car that committed the crime. The truth had been right under their noses all along. The entire town of Nome had only 8 police officers, seen by local residents as guardian angels ensuring community safety. The townspeople placed absolute trust in them. The tireless efforts of these 8 officers over the past month garnered the highest respect from the public. Who would have thought that the perpetrator was among them? After careful consideration, the officer who took the call didn't share the information with anyone else, instead reporting directly to the police chief. The two of them conducted a quiet investigation. By examining duty records, they determined that the officers on duty the night of the incident were Paul, 36 years old, and Owens, 42 years old. The chief questioned them individually. Paul claimed he hadn't been on an external assignment that night and had been at the station writing reports. Owens stated that he had been patrolling near a distant bar, returning to the station around 4 a.m. While they provided clear timelines and areas of activity, either had witnesses to back up their alibis. The police chief decided to subject Paul and Owens to lie detector tests. As Nome didn't have such equipment, the chief arranged for them to be sent to Anchorage, the state's largest city, for the tests, scheduled for the following day. However, that same evening, the police station received a taunting letter from the perpetrator. The letter mocked the police for suspecting their own colleagues and declared the sender to be the true killer. It confidently stated that the police would never catch them and that by the time the police read the letter, the sender would have already left Nome. Seeing the letter, the police chief hesitated for a moment. If the letter was to be believed, then Paul and Owens weren't the culprits, were they? However, the chief quickly saw through the perpetrator's ploy. Instead of clearing Paul and Owens of suspicion, the letter actually intensified the suspicion that the real culprit was one of the two officers. Firstly, the timing of the letter was too coincidental. Secondly, the fact that Paul and Owens were to be sent for lie detector tests was information that only a select few knew. How did the perpetrator know? It was evident that this was a ruse orchestrated by the real culprit to divert attention away from themselves. Unfortunately, this scheme only served to deepen their suspicions. Early the next day, Paul and Owens were sent to Anchorage for lie detector tests. Paul underwent a series of tests, and ultimately proved his innocence. But when it was Owens' turn, he suddenly complained of a headache and said he wasn't in the right condition for the test. Seeing this, the police chief didn't say much, as Owens' behavior essentially confirmed his guilt. The chief promptly arrested him as a suspect and initiated a detailed investigation into his involvement. The population structure of Nome was straightforward, allowing the police to quickly obtain a crucial lead. One witness came forward, stating that on the night of August 11, 2003, the day after Sonia's murder, they saw Owens burning something inside an abandoned factory. Acting on this lead, the police went to the factory and found a button from a pair of jeans and a metal hair accessory in a pile of ashes. These items were identified as belonging to the victim, Sonia. With this discovery, the police had obtained crucial evidence against Owens. Simultaneously, upon learning of Owens' arrest, the police received numerous calls from young women reporting instances of sexual harassment, and even rape by Owens. It turned out that Owens had often abused his position to harass and assault intoxicated women. He chose intoxicated women for several reasons. Outsiders wouldn't question police escorting them home. Intoxicated women were usually less resistant, and he could easily shift blame to them later, citing their impaired judgment. Furthermore, given the high status of the police, especially in smaller communities of that era, victims were often reluctant to report the abuse. It wasn't until Owens' arrest that they finally dared to come forward. Due to the aforementioned factors, Owens had managed to commit his crimes for a long time without consequences, until he encountered Sonia. On the night of the incident, although Sonia had attended a social gathering, she hadn't consumed alcohol. This resulted in fierce resistance when Owens attempted to assault her. Fearing Sonia would report him, Owens chose to silence her by committing murder. After all, since Sonia was sober, the probability of a successful report was high. On November 4, 2003, 3 months after Sonia's murder, Owens faced his first trial in the local court. Following over 2 months of evidence presentation and more than 10 days of deliberation, the jury ultimately delivered an inconclusive verdict. Later investigations revealed that Owens had close connections with several members of the local jury. In pursuit of a fair judgment, 2 years later, on December 6, 2005, after multiple twists and turns, the case was transferred to another city for trial. This time, the trial proceeded smoothly, with all jury members reaching a unanimous decision. Owens was found guilty of first-degree murder and multiple counts of rape, sentenced to 101 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after serving 34 years. Finally, this case was brought to a definitive close.